CloudDB, shaping your new normal.
Welcome everyone to the 2022 APAC OUC OCI Days. This is our first year having a dedicated OCI event, and it's our honor and privilege to run this event with the support of 15 Oracle user groups and Java user groups in the Asia-Pacific region. Please remember to register to as many sessions as you can. This way you'll be able to have access to our replays until June 15, 2022. I would like to say thanks to all Oracle user groups and Java user groups that made this event possible, and also to our sponsors, Oracle Ace Community, the DevRel team, and your main sponsor, Oracle Corporation and CloudDB. Now for today's session, Zero Downtime Migration 21.3 overview by Gavin Soorma. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to use the chat window on your right lower corner of your screen, and Gavin will be answering all your questions at the end of the session. If you have any technical issues or any problems, please use the chat window on the right lower corner. I will also try to help the best I can. If you are watching this through the Facebook stream of one of the 4 user groups that we are streaming live to, please use your chat window in the streaming, and the moderator of your user group will send me, share with us all your questions at the end of the presentation. Now, without more further ado, I want to leave you with this amazing session by Gavin Soorma. Gavin, the room is yours.
Thank you, Francis. Thank you for the introduction, and welcome everyone wherever you are to this session on Zero Downtime Migration, ZDM Overview. I'm Gavin, and we have quite a bit to cover, so I'm just going to be a bit quick in the slides, and we can take some questions at the end of the session. So, as mentioned, this is talking about a tool that we're going to use for migration to the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure OCI. And I'm sure some of us would have used some of the methods out here, like maybe using RBAN or data pump or transport table spaces, or maybe have leveraged data guard, to do a physical standby. You can also do the, if you're using multi-tenancy, you have the cloning and the plugging and unplugging of PDBs. So we do have a number of different methods to move from on-premise to OCI, but typically what happens, the method chosen would depend on how much downtime you are allowed by the business, whereas downtime is money for most businesses. So when we're moving from on-premise to OCI, typically as a DBA or as an architect, we are allowed minimal downtime by most of our businesses. So how do we ensure that we're able to move to OCI with the least amount of downtime? This is something that I have personally used in the past. So used Oracle GoldenGate to move from on-premise to the cloud, as well as between autonomous databases. Now also supports GoldenGate. Or if you want to move from Gen 1 to Gen 2 in OCI, you can also use GoldenGate. But to set up GoldenGate to move to the cloud, there's a number of different steps you got to do. For example, you have to basically configure the GoldenGate source and target environment. So you have things to do in your database, got to set parameters, create users. And then once all that is done, then you go and create what's called an extract that will capture your transactions, issue something called supplemental logging. So it could be schema drawn data or drawn data. And then once all that is done, if my extract is up and running, capturing transactions, then what I can do is take an export of my database while my application is up alive. Take the export and then copy that dump file from the source to the target, then do the import out there. After the import is completed, then I start another process on the target called replicat that basically will apply all transactions that occurred while my export was in progress, while my files were being copied across, while the import is running. So once the replicat has applied all the transactions, which I call delta, then both the source and target, I would say, are in sync. And now we come to a stage where we can decide, it's time to do a cutover. And then I repoint my clients or my application to the OCI database. So what we can do with this method, it has a big advantage because it really doesn't matter what my source and target versions are. So as long as it's supported by GoldenGate and Data Pump, for example, so I can move from Oracle 12c to Oracle 19c or 21c, or I can move from non-CDB to a CDB environment. And so what it does, it enables us to migrate as well as upgrade at the same time. So what is the difference between all this and ZDM. So it is all automated now. So it's just a single command that we can run. I'll show you that in the course of the session. And it basically will automate all these steps that I've shown you out here. So with Zero Downtime Migration, it enables us to migrate workloads to the cloud with, most importantly, minimum downtime, as well as with minimum effort on part of the database administrator. So it's a very simplified approach, and it's also automated a lot. So we can run ZDM, as I will show you, in a couple of different modes. So we can do what's called evaluation, and it goes through the entire process beforehand without actually running a migration. So if there are any potential conflicts or errors, it will detect it and gives us the chance to fix it before we start the actual migration process. So in the background, ZDM employs a number of Oracle maximum availability tried and tested tools like GoldenGate, or Recovery Manager RMAN, Data Pump, Data Guard. So all this actually is being invoked by this tool when we run it. So we really as administrators don't need to have in-depth knowledge about, say, Oracle GoldenGate, because that is being done transparently for us in the background. Like, it goes and creates the GoldenGate users, gives the appropriate permissions, it goes and creates the extract, the replicate, and it does everything for us, which otherwise we would have to need some kind of GoldenGate skills to actually do the same task. So it also supports typically any kind of Oracle database environments, like if you want to move from on-premise to XSES or XSCC, or to different flavors of the OCI, like database as a service on VMs, or even now it supports autonomous databases as well. So you can move from, say, on-premise into ADB or ADW using ZDM. So what does it support in terms of source and targets? Typically, any databases from 11 to 04 onwards, all the way up to 21C. It also supports, in terms of operating systems, AIX, Solaris, and Oracle Linux. In terms of targets, XSCS, XSCC, I mentioned already, Exadata on-premise as well, autonomous databases in the cloud. And we can also, as part of ZDM, move from non-CDB architecture to CDB architecture. So remember, Oracle 19C is going to be the last version of database where we can have non-CDBs. In terms of migrations, we'll discuss what's two different migration types. We have something called physical and logical. And if we're doing what's called a logical migration, then we can also do a process called the in-flight upgrade. That means while the migration is happening, I'm also doing a database upgrade at the same time. In the background, what are the migration methodologies being adopted by ZDM? It uses RMAN and Data Guard, for example, for what's called the physical migrations, and it uses a combination of Data Pump and GoldenGate for what are called the logical migrations. So what are the different concepts in ZDM? So if you're looking at documentation for ZDM, you will come across some of these terms. I'm just very quickly giving you a brief about such terms. So you have something called online migration, offline migration. So as the term suggests, the online migration will enable us to incur near zero downtime for the migration, and it can be either physical or logical as well. The offline migration is where outages will be expected. So we can again do this either physical or logical. And you also have, in the physical migration methods, you have Data Guard and RMAN to perform the migrations in the background. And for the logical methods, you have Oracle Data Pump, and you have also Oracle GoldenGate. So we require to set up what's called a GoldenGate hub. So that's a free image available in the cloud. So before I forget, and this is a question I'm sure most of us are going to ask, is this free? Yes, absolutely free. We don't have to license Oracle GoldenGate. For example, the use of ZDM enables us to use all these technologies underlying for just migration. So I can't go and set up replication, for example, with ZDM. It's purely for migrations, and it lasts for 183 days, the time which I deploy the product. So it's free for 183 days, as long as the purpose is moving to OCI, or basically migration of Oracle databases. So with physical migration, the caveat here is that the source and target versions need to be the same. So obviously I'm doing, like, for example, a physical data guard. So I cannot move from 11G to say 19C. So my source and targets have to be the same if I'm using the physical migration method of ZDM. With logical migration, my supported targets get much more expanded, so I don't have that requirement to have my source and targets being the same version. So I can move from, say, 19C on source to 21C. I can also convert from non-CDB to PDBs, to CDBs and PDBs. And also I can go cross versions. For example, like my source could be on Solaris and my target could be on Linux on Exadata, for example. So with the ZDM logical migration, it also supports cross-platform, cross-versions as well. So the targets, whether for the physical or the logical, are typically includes all what's available in OCI, like your database as a service, Exadata CS, Exadata Cloud Customer, autonomous databases, and ADP as well as ADW. So just to recap, in terms of what's being allowed for physical and logical migrations. So you can see where if I want to go to autonomous, then I have to use the logical either offline or online, because obviously with the autonomous database, I don't have access to the, for example, the operating system. So to physically copy files, I don't have that access. So if I want to go from on-premise to ADW or ATP, I have to use the ZDM's or logical migration. That could be either online or offline. So I'm going to cover in this session, I'm going to talk about the online logical migration methods, and I hopefully will show you some screenshots of a migration I just did. So that is actually showing you this product does work. So what are the different components that are involved in the online logical migration? So we have a new concept called a ZDM node. So ZDM stands for Zero Data Migration. And we need to have a separate machine that's recommended where I install what's called the ZDM software. That machine needs to be on Linux. I install the ZDM software there. Again, I'll try to show you some screenshots of the installation. And then I have my on-premise source. I have my target database. I have a backup location. So that is typically maybe the object store where my export dump files will be copied. So moving from on-premise, say, to the OCI, I have to take the export dump file from on-premise and put it in the object store in the cloud. And the last component, the very most important component of the logical migration method, is the Oracle GoldenGate Hub, they call it. So again, this is a free image that I can install. So it's available in what's called Oracle Cloud Marketplace. And there's a specific GoldenGate image just for migration. So very important that when we go and deploy the image from Cloud Marketplace, we select the image that is specifically for migrations and not the normal GoldenGate microservices. So while my users are connected to my source database, I can do an export. So the export is obviously online, but while that export is happening, I have an extract process that is capturing the changes. So that is pretty much transparent to my application or end users. Then that export is copied to the object store in the cloud. And then from there, ZDM will internally invoke the import data pump job that will import the data into my target database. And once that import is completed, then again, automatically, I'm using the keyword here, automatically, the GoldenGate replicate process will kick in and basically apply all the transactions that have accumulated in what are called GoldenGate trail files. So while my export is running, my application is live, so there are transactions. Then maybe to copy the files from on-premise to object store, it may take maybe a few hours, 10 hours or 12 hours, maybe if it's a very big database. So in that interim time, some more transactions have piled up in my source database. Now the import is completed. Again, it took about maybe 6 hours to do the import. So whatever in-flight transactions occurred, the job of the GoldenGate replicate is basically to go and apply all those transactions until my source and target are pretty much in sync. Once it's in sync, then you can decide, should I ask ZDM now to do the failover as well? So you can control when your failover or the switchover to the new site is going to happen. So as I mentioned earlier, in the background, the logical migration will use what's called GoldenGate and Data Pump. The source database basically remains online while my my clients are connected to the database, and we have to deploy a GoldenGate image from a cloud marketplace. That image basically will be a GoldenGate microservices, I think version 19, that's available right now. And with the GoldenGate Hub, it's doing the job of capturing and applying all the transactions that are occurring on my source database and applying them on my target database. So you can configure the migration job to basically pause where you want it to. So you can say that after the source and target have been brought into sync, I want to pause the migration. I want to maybe run it for maybe a week. I want to do in that time period, maybe do some testing. So that means that while both my databases are in read-write mode, I'm able to actually maybe test. I'm moving from say 12C to 19C. I can run maybe some AWR reports on my target, check performance, even though my users are still connected to the source database, where of course GoldenGate in the background is applying all the transactions. I'm basically testing on near live production data. Once I'm satisfied everything is good, then I can say, okay, ZDM, continue the migration process. And now it'll basically what it does, it will start draining the transactions, stop the extract process, stop the replicate process, and says, okay, now my job is over. Now your job is to basically point all your connections now to the migrated database that's sitting now in OCI. So if I were to look broadly at the steps that are involved in this logical migration, the first thing I have to do is download the software, install the software, and then I basically have to configure my source and target databases, and then I just go and start up ZDM, and it's going to be doing all the other things automatically. So the only manual part that I have to do is download the software and configure ZDM, and then basically there's a command line utility called zdmcli that I will run with the migrate option, and then in the background it's going to do steps 2 to 8 automatically for us. So just one manual part, and the rest is all automated. So a couple of extra things out here. So I need to install a compute instance. So I can use maybe an existing VM. I don't have to, but it's recommended to have a dedicated machine just for ZDM. I think the requirement is that there should be no grid infrastructure process running on it. So if I want to use an existing machine for ZDM, just ensure that it's not part of your rack cluster or grid infrastructure. It needs to be Oracle Linux 7, and it needs to have at least 100 GB of free space. And end of the day, it needs connectivity to the source and target. So we'll configure SSH from the ZDM host, and this ZDM host needs to be able to SSH to both my source as well as my target database servers. So where can this ZDM software be installed? It could be either on-premise, or you can also create a compute instance in the cloud. So I'm just going to show you a few slides of the ZDM install process. So we go and create a separate user. Out here you can see this user called ZDM user, and there are a few packages that we need to install. So those packages are listed out there. So just I need a Linux 7 machine with these packages installed, and then I go and download the ZDM software. I'll show you with the location where you can download it from, and I just go unzip it. I set up a few variables for the ZDM users like ZDM home, ZDM base. So this is the location where you can download it from. So right now the version is 21.3. So if you click on that download, it takes you actually into your e-delivery, and you can go and download the software. So the software is not very big. It's only, right now you can see there's 760 MB. And this is the most current version as of March 2022, 21.3. So we just go and download the software, copy it to our ZDM host, and then run the unzip command as the ZDM user. So it goes and creates a file called, it's creating a directory called 21.3. And once I'm in that particular 21.3 directory, after the unzip has been done, I go and issue another shell script called ZDM install, passing some variables like your ZDM home and the ZDM base. And it goes and basically will install the software for us. You can see in the background, it also goes and creates a MySQL database. Once the software has been installed, we have to go and start what's called the ZDM service. So I'm just showing you some screenshots here. So we have to ensure that the service called the ZDM service is up and running. And that is pretty much all you have to do in terms of the configuration. So go and create a user, download the required packages. Let's just ensure that you are on Linux 7 and unzip the zip file that we have downloaded from eDelivery, and then start the ZDM service and ensure the service is in a good state. Okay, so you can run ZDM service status and just ensure that the service running is as showing as true out here. So that is all we have to do at this point in time on the ZDM host. What is the other things we have to do? We have to generate what's called the SSH key, because like I mentioned earlier, you need to be able to SSH from the ZDM host to your source and targets. So we go and generate a key, and there's also something called an API signing key. So what is this API signing key? This enables connectivity from the ZDM host to your OCI console. So I'll just show you where you have to put the contents of this key. So you go and generate what's called the API signing key. Then you go into your console, and then under user preferences, there'll be a menu option for API keys. You cut and paste, the value of this one here. So there's a file called public.pem. I created this file, and the contents of this file is basically put here. And then what it does, after I say add API key, it generates what's called a fingerprint. So these values we have to actually pass into what's called our response file. So we need to preserve these values somewhere, and we'll be using these values in our response file. So what this does, it enables us to connect from the ZDM host all the way into your OCI console automatically in the background. Okay, so that's done on the ZDM side. Now going back to our databases, I think maybe I wrongly mentioned that ZDM will set up your source and target GoldenGate. No, so that's the manual step you also have to do. So you have to go and create the GoldenGate user and change a few parameters in your database that supports GoldenGate. So if you have used GoldenGate in the past, these parameters may be quite already known to you, like enable GoldenGate replication, for example, stream spool size. Your database needs to be in archive log mode, obviously. Force logging has to be set to yes. And also we have to enable what's called minimal supplemental logging. And we create a GoldenGate user. So if it's obviously if it's a CDB PDB, we have to create a user in the container. C hash maybe ggadmin, I shown out here, and then we use the DBMS GoldenGate auth to grant the required admin privileges to this user. So we do this in both the source and target databases. So if your source is 11.204, it needs to have some packages. Why is these required? To support something called integrated extracts. So if you're not in 11.204 source, you don't have to worry about those packages. Those patches, because they're already present in the higher versions. So this is the important part, because this response file is the file that will be read by the utility to go and actually do the installation for us. So each of the different methods has its own response file. So this response file is tailored for what's called my online logical migration. So you can see out here the very first parameter we put in is the migration method, online logical, and data transfer medium here is object store. Then I have to put in some information about my source and target. So let's just go quickly through the response file. So my target out here is a 19C database, and my source is what? Oracle 12C database. So I obtain what's called the OSID value. So this can be obtained from the console. So go to OCI console and go into your database and obtain the value for the database. And we have a user called system that we're going to use for the migration. So it should be a user with appropriate privileges. And on the source side, I have to provide some more values. These values are for the container, so where GoldenGate is basically running. So I have to provide the names of the GoldenGate users. And I also have to provide information about the connections to both the source and target, like the service names, which host it's running on. And I have to do the same for my pluggable database as well. So just some information about the source and target. And coming down next, we have to provide some information about the OCI part now. So what is our tenancy? Again, it has an OSID value. Note the fingerprint is what we got from the API signing key. So we have to put that value in here, and also the location of this key. So this key is on the ZDM host. We are running the zdmcli utility also from the ZDM host. So we're telling the command line utility which is the PM file to use. And it'll use those credentials to basically connect to OCI console. On the GoldenGate side, now we also installed GoldenGate. So like I said, we have to go and download the marketplace image, and we have to provide the user that we have configured GoldenGate marketplace image to run in. So in this case, my admin user is OGG admin. What is the URL of the GoldenGate hub? So I provide this is the machine name where I've installed the GoldenGate marketplace. So it goes and creates a compute instance for you. And I have two deployments out here. So I have a deployment called source, and I have a deployment called target. So this is basically when you install GoldenGate Cloud Marketplace, it asks you a few questions. One is the deployment name. What is the source? What's the target? What is my admin username, for example? So that information I get from my GoldenGate hub, and I put that in my response file. Similarly, for data pump, I need to specify my directory. Okay, so where's my directory on my source? So here I have a directory called data pump dir, and I give the path for it. And I also have to provide the name of the directory on the target as well. And importantly, I have to provide what's called the bucket name. So which bucket in my object store is the export dump file going to be copied, all right? So I need to provide that, and also something called a namespace. So information about the export dump file directories, and also information about the object store. So all this information I need to provide once into my response file. Once that is done, then I'm good to go and run ZDM CLI in what's called evaluation mode. So I specify some parameters like my source and my target, which is my source node, whereas my private key file that's going to be used for SSH. And I also provide the location of the response file. So I created this response file, and I specify the location of the response file because it's going to be read by the ZDM CLI utility. So the last parameter is very important. I'm running it in evaluation mode. So it's very important for us to run it first in evaluation mode because it'll go through and check a lot of things. And we don't want to find any surprises when we actually start our migration process. So I need to provide passwords here for the system user, my GoldenGate users. I also have to provide the password for the OGG admin, so my GoldenGate hub. And once I provide all these passwords, in the background, ZDM CLI will create what's called the migration job in evaluation mode this time. It gives us a job ID, and then what we can do, we can run the command ZDM CLI query job with the job ID, and it gives us very important information about the progress and status of different phases of the job. So for example, out here, we can see now this is running in evaluation mode, and it's going to go through a number of different phases. So I'll go through those different phases in the next slide. But you can see it's going to be doing all these things as part of the evaluation checks. So let's have a quick look at some of the checks that it's doing. So the first thing obviously it does is validates the source and target. Okay, can I connect to the source database? Can I connect to the target database with the information that's provided? Are the service names right? Is the listener ports correct? Is the passwords correct? Is there a user called /admin because that's the user you have told exists? So it goes and physically checks in each of the source and target databases. Is there this particular user? Does it have the required privileges? Is your database running in archive log mode? Is it running in with force logging enabled? Is it running with minimal supplemental logging? So all these checks it does. Does it have the enable GoldenGate parameter set to true? So it does the checks of both the source and target for us, because if, for example, the parameter was not there, then when we start the actual migration, it's going to basically fail. So also it not only goes and checks the source and target databases, but it goes and checks the very important component that we mentioned earlier, which is the GoldenGate hub. So it goes and checks your microservices environment. Is there a deployment running? Is the deployment healthy state? Is your service manager process running? And what it does, it goes and creates, even in evaluation mode, it goes and creates what's called a credential store. So that credential store stores the credentials of the GoldenGate administrator user that we're going to be using to connect to the source and target databases. So it does that even though it's evaluation mode. It goes and creates a credential store and checks, okay, now with these credentials, can I connect from the GoldenGate hub to both the source and target as well? So that also is being checked in this phase. So the next step it does, okay, check the source and target, check the GoldenGate. Now I need to go and check the data pump settings. You mentioned a directory called data pump dir in the response file. Is the directory accessible? Okay. Once it says yes, it's accessible, what it does, it goes and creates a small test file and says, can I copy this file to the object store with the information that's provided about the bucket? So it creates a small file and it goes and does an actual transfer to the object store to confirm, yes, everything is right. And when the actual export is created, yes, I'll be able to copy that dump file to the object store as well. So it validates your data pump settings on the source and target as well. And it also tells you, okay, in this case, I've configured it to only do a few tables. Okay, what is the size? How many bytes is going to be? So it generates an estimate for you as well. Once all that is done, it's successfully passed all these stages. We can see that now the evaluation is showing as succeeded, and all these different steps have gone through. So you can see it took about 5 minutes to run because it does a lot of comprehensive checks in the background, and I'd rather it take more time now to do all the checks and report any failures as opposed to discovering it when I actually do the migration. So once this is out of the way, yes, we have done our planning phase, and now we are ready to go. So now when it comes to actually doing the migration, I basically will run pretty much the same thing. And all I'm doing now is just removing the flag for evaluation, and I add another parameter called pause after, and I specify at what stage I want to stop the ZDCLI part. Okay, so there's a phase called ZDM monitor GoldenGate lag or GG lag. So that means what it means is that once the extract is up and running, once my replicate process is up and running, my import has been completed, both the source and target databases now are being brought in sync by GoldenGate. At that point in time, what I can say is that if all these steps are completed, then any transaction that happens on the source will be replicated successfully to the target. So while that is happening, I have now paused my ZDM CLI migration because I said if I want, I can now pause it for 1 day, 2 days, 1 hour, whatever you want, because you can do a very important test right now on your target, as opposed to discovering it when you actually do the migration. Is everything up and running? Is all the procedures, all the objects in a valid state? I can run some maybe test queries on my target. Maybe I'm moving from Oracle 12 to Oracle 19, and I'm not sure how some certain queries are going to behave because there are some optimizer changes. I can go and test those queries now on my target without impacting my source. Okay, so once all this runs, then you can decide whether you want to continue with the migration, and I'll show you how that is done. So what it does now in this phase, it will do all those other checks. Okay, so it doesn't bypass those because maybe you did your checks maybe 1 week back or 2 weeks back, and something has happened in the intervening period. So even though we have done those checks earlier, when I run this ZDM CLI utility once again, it will do all those other checks, and it'll also come to this phase, which is different now. So it'll do all the checks that we discussed in the evaluation phase, and now it comes to do some more tasks as well. So what are these tasks? So it goes and creates what are called heartbeat tables. So GoldenGate uses a concept of heartbeat tables. These are tables that are internally used by GoldenGate to keep a track of any lag between the source and target. So it goes and creates these heartbeat tables for us on both the source and target. Once it creates these heartbeat tables, it goes and creates the extract process. So the important thing to keep in mind here is that in the evaluation phase, as far as GoldenGate is concerned, it only goes and creates a credential store. And using the credentials in the credential store, it checks to see, yes, I can connect to both the source and target. It doesn't go and create the extract or replicate process for us. But now in this actual migration, it goes and creates the heartbeat tables, and it also goes and creates the GoldenGate extract for us as well. So you can see out here, it's creating the extract process. And on the target side, it creates what's called heartbeat tables and what's called checkpoint tables. So these are tables that are used, is a table that is used internally by GoldenGate. And it also then goes and creates the GoldenGate replicate process. So create the extract process, create the heartbeat tables on source, create the heartbeat tables on target, then go and create the replicate process. Once all that is done, the final phase now is basically monitoring the lag. So keep in mind, before this phase happened, the import has already been completed. So only after the import gets completed, then it goes into the GoldenGate side and creates all these other things. So import is completed, export was done, copy to object store, import done. Okay, all those phases completed. Now let me go to GoldenGate and start the work in creating the extract, the replicate, the heartbeat tables, checkpoint tables, etc. Everything is done. Now monitor lag. So at this point in time, my source and target are being kept in sync, and my migration is basically paused while all these checks are going on. So now let's see what happens here. So let's try to see like a test migration. So I have a source database in Oracle 12. I have a table called demo.my objects, and you can see it has a row count 72263. Now I'm going to simulate some transactions on the source. I'm going to insert some more records. I've inserted 435 rows, and my source table now has 72698 rows. So what's happening in the background? So I can go into my GoldenGate hub. So I can actually physically connect to the GoldenGate hub. All right. So I can connect from web browser. I have the OGG admin user and password. Excuse me. And now here is my GoldenGate Service Manager. You can see version 19.100. And I have two deployments. One is called source and target. So each deployment has got its own processes. And now I can go and connect to my source deployment. And when I connect to my source, I can see that the extract is running. So this is the extract that was created internally by GoldenGate. The extract is running fine, and then I can go and check the details for this extract. So I can see out here, the recent statistics show that 435 inserts were done. So it has captured this last transaction, which we made here. 435 rows were inserted. So that is fine on the extract side. So now I want to check to see my target replicate as well. So I can go now into the target side, into the target deployment, open the admin server, go to the replicate page. So I can see the replicate is also running successfully. And I can see that the replicate has also inserted these 435 rows. What you see extra is information that's going into what's called the heartbeat table. So like every minute, or if you can configure how often these heartbeat tables is updated, but these heartbeat tables are used internally by GoldenGate to report something called lag. So let's not worry about that. We can see out here my target table has been updated. So PDB1, so my source that's my 12C database. So my source database had the pluggable database name was db12c underscore PDB1, and my target 19C database has the pluggable database just called PDB1. So I can see 435 inserts have happened. And now if I connect to my Oracle 19C database, I can see, yes, initially there was 72263 records. And now with those additional 435 inserts, the row count in that table is now 72698. So we can let this run for maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 1 hour, 1 week. So you decide how long you want GoldenGate to keep your source and target synchronized. Important thing to keep in mind is if I'm not using ZDM and I was just using the licensed version of GoldenGate, then I can do also another step, which is called bidirectional replication. So let's assume I'm wanting to upgrade from 12C to 19C, so I can configure replication from Oracle 12 to 19, and I can also configure replication from 19C back to 12. That gives me my fallback mechanism. So that part is not here. Okay, so you cannot fall back with ZDM. All right, that's an important thing to keep in mind. So if you use GoldenGate in the past, you did have that ability, you had that cushion because GoldenGate can replicate between Oracle 12 and Oracle 19C, and also from 19C back to Oracle 12. So in case you want to go back after 1 week, you discover something in Oracle 19C is not working, your Oracle 12C database is also being kept in sync. So with ZDM, the fallback is not possible. Okay, because there's no bidirectional replication being configured by ZDM. It's just purely for migration. Okay. So now let's assume we have decided, yes, we are good to go. And now I want to basically complete this migration. Maybe I want to do it off peak hours, maybe on the weekend. My application is not live. So this is where typically my outage would start. Okay, not now. So still to my users, it's pretty much transparent. So I will go and resume the job. So we had pause a job. Now we say go and resume the same job. So we give the job ID, which is 36 in this case. And what it does, it starts whatever is remaining. So you can see out here, the last phase of the completed status was ZDM monitor GG lag, and now it has to do the other parts of the job, which is basically going to be doing the switchover of the application. So what it does in the background. So like I said, here is where my outage would potentially start. So at some point in time, I have to say, okay, yes, no transactions would happen on my source, because if I keep transactions happening on the source, then GoldenGate is going to keep replicating them to the target. So at some point in time, I have to take a pause. So this is where I have to pause my application. And when I pause my application, GoldenGate knows, okay, now my database is pretty much idle. My extract process is not capturing any new transactions. So it waits for the source database to become idle. So when I say idle, it doesn't mean I'm going to put it in some quiz state or something. My users are still connected maybe, but at this point in time, there's no active transactions running. Because if active transactions were running, the extract process would capture it, apply to the trail file, and then the replicate process would continue applying those on the target, and that cycle will continue. Okay, so we have to pause. So when I say it's zero downtime, I would say zero is not the right word. Yes, minimal downtime is the right word, because we have to pause our application so that the extract process also will know nothing is running. And then when the ZDM tool finds that the extract process is pretty much idle now, it goes and stops the extract process. That means once the extract process is stopped, then I need to ensure that no transactions will happen on my source. Okay, important. So once I issue this command out here, I don't want any transactions to be happening on my source. So this is where my outage will typically begin. When I resume this job, that's when I'm assuming this is where my outage will start, because my extract process has to find the database to be idle, no new transactions coming in. Then what it does, it goes and stops the extract process. It'll also go and stop the replicate process as well. Okay. So once the extract process is basically stopped, it'll go and stop the replicate process as well, and then clean up all my internal tables that GoldenGate created, like your heartbeat tables, checkpoint table. It goes and deletes the trail file. So it basically does the entire cleanup for us. And at this point in time, my users are now connected to the OCI database. For example, I've reported my application from on-premise to OCI, and pretty much we're now good to go. You can see all the steps have been completed successfully, and voila, my migration is completed. Okay, so that was a very, very quick overview about ZDM, guys. So if you want to learn more about it, there's a lot of information that Oracle has published. So there's a very good live labs as well. If you go to this particular page shown out here, you will get a lot of information, a lot of step-by-step guides. So step-by-step guides for each of the different aspects we talked about, like there's a step-by-step guide for the physical migration, there's a step-by-step guide for the logical migration, there's a step-by-step guide for moving to XCS, as well as another guide for moving to autonomous databases. So a lot of information you can find here on this web page, and also in the live labs as well. If you want to learn more about this product, then live labs is a great place to go to, because whatever I showed you out here, you can actually go and practice this in your cloud tenancy. If you don't have a cloud tenancy, you can use a free tenancy that they provide in live labs, and you can pretty much try out whatever I've shown you out here. So guys, that was a very, very quick overview of ZDM. So hope you will start using it. Yes, it's a totally free tool, guys. And I'm saying it again because there was some misconception about GoldenGate licensing and stuff. You don't need a license for GoldenGate. Provided you use ZDM only for migrations, and it's valid for 183 days of free use. With that, guys, I come to the end of the session. I think I'm just bang on time. And thanks very much for attending. If you do have any questions about ZDM or anything else, please feel free to contact me either through my website shown there or through my email address as well.
Thank you so much, Gavin. And I have a question from Vijay. Do we have to install 12C, 19C software on the target?
Okay, in this example, I have two compute nodes sitting in OCI. So I have one compute node with Oracle 12C installed and one compute node with Oracle 19C installed. So ZDM will not install any Oracle software for us. It will not install GoldenGate for us. We have to download the GoldenGate image. When we download the GoldenGate image from Marketplace, it has an inbuilt GoldenGate software installed for us. So the software that we have to install is the ZDM software, like I mentioned on the ZDM host. And obviously the understanding here is that I already have a fully functional source database and a fully functional target database. So ZDM is not going to do anything for us in terms of the source and target. We have to have both those databases up and running. All we're going to provide to ZDM is, listen, here is the connectivity from ZDM to the source and to the target. And after that, it's basically good to go then.
Thank you so much, Gavin. If the people, because I'm not seeing any much questions coming through even by Facebook or here, if anyone has any questions and want to do that offline, you can use the contact information that Gavin has on here in the screen at the moment, prosolutions@gavinsoorma.com, and you can contact him offline. If you're watching the replays, you can also contact him with any questions offline directly to his email. Shane is also saying thank you, Shane McGregor.
Thanks, everyone.
Saying that, thank you so much, Gavin, for taking the time to share your experience and knowledge with the Asia Pacific and global community. And hope to everyone to please take care and be safe and enjoying the final session at 6 p.m. will be the final session of this event. Thank you, everyone. Please take care. All right. Bye-bye.